I have a surprise for our anniversary. My name is Michael. I'm 37 and I run quality control at North Peak Engineering in Phoenix. I thought I knew my wife. For months, Melissa had been different, not angry, just too happy. She hummed while doing the dishes, bought new clothes, and went back to the gym after 2 years of excuses. Our 10th anniversary was coming up and she kept talking about a surprise. The way she said it made my stomach twist like she was savoring something I wasn't supposed to understand. What kind of surprise? I asked one night, watching her apply makeup at 8 o'clock for what she called a book club meeting. You'll see, she said, kissed my cheek, and left. I wiped the lipstick off and tried not to think about it. The book club meeting stretched until midnight. Errands that should have taken an hour dragged into whole afternoons. She took phone calls in the garage. I wasn't the jealous type. I didn't snoop or follow her. If she wanted out, I figured she'd tell me. The surprise came 3 days before our anniversary. I got home early from work around 3 p.m. A shipment delay had killed our afternoon schedule. Melissa's car was in the driveway and parked next to it was a silver BMW I didn't recognize. I called her name when I walked in, no answer. Then I heard voices upstairs. Melissa's laugh and a man's voice I couldn't place. I went up. Our bedroom door was cracked. Michael should be home soon, the man said. Are you sure about this? He asked. Trust me, Melissa replied. I pushed the door open. They were sitting on the edge of our bed, dressed like they were waiting for something. Melissa wore the red dress I'd given her for Christmas. The man, Raymond Torres, the financial advisor she'd introduced me to at a neighborhood barbecue 6 months earlier, had one hand resting on her knee. He drove the BMW and had that clean-cut, confident look. Everyone said he was great with money. Surprise, Melissa said, standing up and smiling like she was proud. Her smile made my blood run cold. They weren't scrambling, not embarrassed, not trying to hide anything. The way they looked at each other told me everything I needed to know. I stood in the doorway for 10 seconds. No one said a word. Melissa kept smiling. I turned, went downstairs, grabbed my keys, and left. I drove to the Marriott downtown, checked in for a week, paid cash, turned off my phone, and sat on the bed staring at the wall until dark. 10 years of marriage, gone in a few seconds of someone else's laugh. We met at Arizona State. I was finishing my engineering degree. She was studying marketing, ambitious and beautiful, the kind of woman who turned heads. We bought the house in Scottsdale 5 years ago and split everything 50-50, even though my salary at North Peak was higher. She'd talked about starting a consulting business, then later said she wanted to focus on us. Maybe a family someday, she'd said. That someday never came. Whenever I brought up kids, there was always a reason to wait. More money, better timing, her career, my career. Always something. Raymond had shown up at the Hendersons' barbecue last summer. Tom introduced him as a financial advisor who'd boosted their portfolio 15% in 6 months. Melissa spent most of that evening talking to him about investments. On the drive home, she said, we should diversify. Raymond thinks we're being too conservative. At first, I didn't think much of it. Melissa had always been interested in money. She started having coffee with Raymond to discuss our finances. Then lunches. Then weekend meetings where they spread paperwork across our dining room table and talked market trends. He's helping us, she'd say when I questioned how often she met him. You should trust me on this. That word, trust, tasted different now. Sitting alone in a hotel while my wife entertained another man in our bedroom. Other warnings were there in hindsight. Phone calls she'd take outside. Credit card charges at restaurants I'd never heard of. A gym membership she said was for yoga, but that never produced a yoga mat at home. 3 months ago, Raymond suggested I introduce him to some of my colleagues at North Peak. Professional networking, he called it. Mutual benefit. I gave him contact details for 5 guys from work. Engineers with decent salaries and retirement funds. Tom had vouched for him and his numbers looked legitimate. These are good people, I told Raymond when I handed over the information. Don't waste their time unless you can deliver. Of course, he said, shaking my hand. Trust, said again. I ordered room service and ate in silence. On the 3rd day at the hotel, I called a private investigator. His name was Frank Sullivan, a retired Phoenix police detective who now handled divorce cases and corporate fraud. I'd found his number online and met him at a diner on Camelback Road. Standard cheating spouse investigation? He asked after I explained. Start there, I said. But I want to know everything, her finances, his business, how long this has been going on, what they're planning. Frank was in his 60s, gray-haired with tired eyes, the look of someone who'd seen every kind of betrayal. You sure you want to know everything? He asked. Truth costs extra. Yes, I said. I nodded. Frank called 2 days later and told me to bring a notebook. We'd meet at his small office above a coffee shop in central Phoenix. Frank had 3 manila folders on his desk. Your wife's been having an affair with Raymond Torres for 8 months, he said. He started it. But that's not the interesting part. He opened the first folder. Bank statements, investment records, correspondence. Raymond Torres, clean-cut confident Raymond Torres, ran a Ponzi scheme. Classic setup. Used new investors' money to pay fake returns to earlier investors, create the appearance of success, and reel in more victims. My stomach dropped. Melissa knew. She'd been recruiting people through her social connections, getting a cut of every investment, a 5% commission on initial deposits. Frank opened the second folder. Photos of Melissa meeting with people I recognized, neighbors, friends from church, women from her book club, which apparently did exist. She'd been working as Raymond's recruiter for 6 months. The affair provided cover for their business meetings. Romance kept them motivated. The third folder held the worst news. Remember those colleagues you introduced to Raymond? All 5 invested. That alone was $430,000. The estimated total taken was $2.3 million from roughly 40 investors. Frank told me Melissa's recruitment network had brought in about 60% of that. I stared at the names. People who trusted my recommendation. I felt nauseous thinking about them losing their life savings because I'd handed over a phone number. How much is that total? I asked. About $2.3 million, Frank said. 40 investors. 60% came through her network, he added. There was more. Raymond was planning to disappear, liquidating assets, moving money offshore. He'd been wiring funds to accounts in the Caymans. My mind spun. My marriage was over. That hurt, but I'd already accepted it. What made me sick was knowing friends and co-workers had been lured by the woman I married. What kind of evidence do you have? I asked. Frank smiled like someone who had the cards in his hand. For the next day, I read through everything he'd compiled. Financial records, doctored portfolio statements, photographs, recorded phone calls. The operation was bigger than I'd imagined. Raymond promised 15% annual returns and used legitimate-sounding jargon and falsified statements to convince people. For the first months, investors did receive returns, money taken from newer victims. Melissa's role was crucial. She provided credibility and access. When she recommended Raymond to her book club friends or neighbors, they trusted her judgment. When I introduced him to my colleagues, they trusted mine. Frank even had recordings of Melissa and Raymond talking strategy. Michael's engineer friends are perfect, Melissa said on one call Frank played. They understand numbers, but not finance. Easy targets. Hearing her voice say that broke something inside me. I called Frank from the hotel and told him I wanted to confront them. Bad idea, he said. Tip them off and they'll run. Raymond's already moving money offshore. You spook them now and your friends never see a dime. Then what do you suggest? I asked. Keep gathering evidence for another week, maybe 2. Then we involve the feds. SEC for investment fraud, FBI for wire fraud and money laundering. How long before they disappear? I asked. Hard to say, Frank said. But they'll accelerate if they suspect you know. 2 weeks felt like forever. The next morning I broke my own rule and drove past the house. Melissa's car was gone. Raymond's BMW sat in the driveway like he owned the place. I parked across the street and called Frank. Change of plans, I told him. I'm going to talk to them. Don't, Frank warned. I hung up and walked to the front door. Raymond answered, wearing one of my old Arizona State shirts and holding a cup of coffee. Coffee brewed with my machine in my kitchen. He didn't look surprised. Melissa said you were staying somewhere else, he said. Come in. His casualness made my hands shake. Inside, Melissa sat at the kitchen table with papers spread out. Financial documents, investor statements. She looked up when I walked in. We need to talk, I said. About what? She asked. About our future? About Raymond's business? About the mistake you made walking out? She said, as if I was the one who'd done something wrong. I know about the Ponzi scheme, I said. Raymond's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Melissa went pale. I don't know what you mean, Raymond said. 2.3 million. 40 investors. My colleagues at North Peak lost $430,000 because I vouched for you, I said. Melissa stood. You don't understand what you're talking about, she snapped. I understand perfectly, I said. You've been recruiting victims for him and getting paid to destroy people's lives. Raymond set his cup down slowly. Michael, you're obviously upset about the marriage situation, but business is business. Your friends made investment decisions as adults based on information we provided. If you can prove otherwise, take it to court, he said. The cold in her voice shocked me. This wasn't the woman I'd married. I want you both out of my house, I said. Raymond smiled. Actually, that's not going to happen. Legally speaking, this is Melissa's house too. Arizona is a community property state. She has every right to be here. And I have every right to bring my business partner to my home. They called him a business partner now. I left without another word. Back at the hotel, I called Frank and told him what happened. You gave them a warning, he said. They'll accelerate their timeline now. Good, I said. Let them run. You have enough evidence to prosecute, right? Maybe, he replied. But I dug deeper. 20 minutes later, Frank arrived at my room with a new folder. He'd been researching Raymond's background and found something worse. Raymond Torres wasn't who he said he was. He was Raymond Terrell, who'd run a similar operation in Colorado 3 years earlier, defrauding investors of about $1.8 million and fleeing before prosecution. He was operating under a false identity, fake social security number, a manufactured credit history and driver's license under the Torres name. Frank spread the documents across the small hotel table. But here's the interesting part, he said. Your wife didn't just meet him at a barbecue. She sought him out. My head went fuzzy. Frank showed me bank records, cash withdrawals totaling $25,000 from our joint account over 2 months that I hadn't known about. That cash, Frank believed, was seed money Melissa used to help Raymond establish credibility with his first investors. He showed me printed web pages, Melissa's user account on fraud forums where people discuss investment scams and predator tactics. She'd been studying Ponzi schemes for over a year, reading guides, participating in forums where fraudsters exchange techniques. She'd actively searched him out. She wasn't just a recruiter. She was a partner, an equal investor in the fraud. The room felt like it was tilting. Every fact Frank laid out pushed me further from the life I thought I knew. I sat there with the folders between us, trying to reconcile the woman in those photos and recordings with the woman I'd loved for 10 years. She planned the whole thing. The affair was secondary. Business first, pleasure second. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, scrolling through Melissa's online posts. She'd written detailed analyses of how financial fraud worked, the psychology of victim selection, the art of building trust, the language to use to sound credible. One post made my blood run cold. The key is using your existing relationships. People who trust you personally will trust your business recommendations without proper due diligence. How long has she been planning this? I asked Frank. He sighed. Based on her online activity, at least 18 months. She studied other fraud cases. What worked, what didn't. She learned how to avoid prosecution. Then she found Raymond and proposed a partnership. He closed the folder, his expression grave. There's something else. They're planning to disappear next week. Flights booked to Mexico under false names. Raymond's been liquidating his assets. They think you'll take a few months to figure out what really happened. They're running together and partners in crime, partners in escape. The affair was probably part of the plan. Easier to coordinate when you're romantically involved. I stood and walked to the window. The lights of Phoenix stretched out below me, neighborhoods where our victims lived. People who had trusted Melissa. Trusted me. What's the timeline for prosecution? I asked. If we hand everything over tomorrow, maybe a week before warrants are issued, Frank said. But by then they'll be gone. Then we need to move faster. He nodded. I've got enough evidence to destroy them both. But we have to be smart. What do you recommend? Let them think they're safe. Then hit them from all sides. Federal charges, public exposure, asset seizures. Complete destruction. Do it, I said. Frank and I spent the next 2 days planning the takedown. We needed speed, but more importantly, precision. The key is coordination, Frank explained. Hit them from multiple directions at once. They can't run if they're surrounded by crisis. Step 1, document everything. Frank already had comprehensive proof of the Ponzi scheme, but we needed irrefutable evidence of Melissa's leadership role. He installed surveillance outside the house, recording their late-night planning conversations. Step 2. Protect the victims. Frank contacted the SEC and FBI, providing preliminary evidence to start official investigations. Federal agencies move slowly, but once they had probable cause, they could freeze accounts before any escape. Step 3. Public exposure. Frank knew journalists at the Arizona Republic. Local financial fraud with real victims? That was front-page material. We'll coordinate the timing, Frank said. Federal raids, media coverage, everything at once. And then you'll deliver the final blow. What's the final blow? I asked. He smiled. You'll see. We scheduled it all for Thursday morning. Melissa and Raymond had booked flights for Friday evening. They thought they had one more day. At 6 a.m., FBI agents knocked on my front door. Frank and I watched from across the street as they served search warrants and led Raymond and Melissa away in handcuffs. Agents carried boxes of files, laptops, and documents out of my home, the same house where Melissa had once promised we'd build a future. By 8 a.m., the Arizona Republic published the headline, "Local Couple Defrauds Investors of Millions in Ponzi Scheme." Their faces were plastered on the front page, smiling, confident, now infamous. The article detailed their scam, listed the victims, and even quoted people who had lost their life savings. At 10 a.m., the SEC announced civil enforcement action seeking full restitution. But the real blow came at noon. Frank had arranged for sealed evidence packages to be delivered to every single victim. Each package contained documentation proving how they'd been targeted, emails, phone transcripts, forged statements, and evidence that the affair had been part of their scheme. The packages also included Melissa's own online posts, her step-by-step guides for manipulating trust and recruiting victims. I was in the hotel lobby when Frank called. "Packages delivered," he said. 43 victims now have the truth, including your 5 colleagues. How are they taking it? Check your phone. I turned it on for the first time in a week. Dozens of messages flooded in. Tom Henderson, just got the package. Can't believe Melissa planned all this. You okay, man? Janet Morrison, saw the news. So sorry you went through that. She fooled all of us. Dave Collins, got the evidence. We don't blame you, Michael. You were a victim too. The messages kept coming. Outrage toward Melissa and Raymond. Sympathy for me. Gratitude toward Frank. Then Frank texted again. Turn on Channel 12 News. On the screen, reporters stood outside the Maricopa County Courthouse. Raymond and Melissa were being led in for their arraignment. Melissa looked directly at the camera, pale, hair disheveled, eyes empty. Raymond kept his head down, but the fear was obvious. The reporter announced they were being held without bail as flight risks. Watched her disappear through the courthouse doors and felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. The trial lasted 3 months. Frank's evidence was overwhelming. Bank transfers, recordings, emails, fake portfolio statements, and proof of their planned escape. I testified for 2 days, explaining how I'd unknowingly helped them recruit victims. The prosecutor made it clear I was one of those victims. Melissa's lawyer tried to paint her as manipulated, a woman seduced and coerced by Raymond. But her own words on those fraud forms destroyed that argument. The jury heard how she studied victim psychology, how she'd written strategies for exploiting. Trust. Raymond's defense tried to claim it was just bad investment management. The offshore accounts and doctored statements said otherwise. When the prosecutor addressed the jury, her voice was firm. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was calculated. They studied their victims, exploited their trust, and planned to vanish when the money ran out. Victim impact statements filled an entire day. 43 people, retirees, parents, engineers, told stories of lost college funds, retirement savings, and broken friendships. Dave Collins, my colleague, looked directly at the defendants and said, "I trusted Michael's recommendation because I trusted Michael." They weaponized that friendship to steal my family's future. After 6 hours, the verdict came back. Guilty on all counts: wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, identity theft. Melissa was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Raymond got 15, plus 5 more when his Colorado crimes resurfaced. All their assets were seized. Homes, cars, accounts, gone. The victims recovered about 30 cents on the dollar. It wasn't much, but it was justice. I stood outside the courthouse watching Melissa being led away in handcuffs. She looked at me once, eyes hollow, her confidence gone. Raymond didn't look at anyone. Frank joined me on the steps. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Empty," I said. "But clean. I sold the house in Scottsdale. Too many ghosts. Moved to a small place in Tempe, closer to work, with no room for anyone else." Melissa's old friends and neighbors turned their backs on her. Once they learned she had studied them like data points, evaluating which of them would make the easiest marks. Any sympathy vanished. Her own family disowned her. Raymond's professional network blacklisted him permanently. His financial license was revoked. When they're released, they'll have nothing but debt and a criminal record. Months later, Melissa sent me a letter from prison, said she'd been in love, that she'd made mistakes. I didn't finish it. I threw it away after the first paragraph. Frank and I still meet for coffee sometimes. "You did the right thing," he told me once. "Most people would have walked away. You fought for the truth." I returned to North Peak Engineering. My co-workers welcomed me back. They knew I'd been deceived too. Melissa and Raymond paid the price for their betrayal, and the system made sure their victims got justice. Walking away from that courthouse, I realized something I'll never forget. Trust without verification is just hope dressed as faith. Real integrity means protecting the people who rely on you, not exploiting their confidence for personal gain.